Well, Brian Wildsmith's a very distinguished English illustrator, and we'd like to welcome him this afternoon. Brian, one of the creatures of the Australian mythology is called a bunyip. Could you, if I asked you, do a drawing or an illustration of some sort based on a bunyip?
It's like asking a writer to write an instant story. You know, say, write me a story.
Right.
No, I couldn't do it. I suppose there are perhaps artists who could, but I need time to think about it, to find out all I can about what it is, what the subject matter is,
yeah.
And also to work out a way of doing the book, because I believe, you know, like music, you might have the same pianist playing Bach or Chopin, but to each composer he would give a different interpretation. And I feel this about books, that each idea really has to be interpreted and illustrated in its own particular way. And this, you know, takes time to solve the problem of how to do it.
Well, I bought this book in 1964 for my son. It's been well thumbed, as you can see.
That's how a book should
and it
be.
was called The North Wind and the Sun. Well,
Yeah.
how would you start a book like this?
Well, I remember this book in particular because this is really one of the books that posed me a great problem in how to interpret the particular subject matter. And with a title like The North Wind and the Sun, well, the sun is quite easy to do, but the wind, how do you draw the north wind? Well, I thought about it in many drawings, and then it came to me that, well, the wind is really abstract. You can't see it. You can feel it, but you can't see it. Therefore, do it in an abstract way. And in fact, not until I did the drawing of the wind, which is there, that I really solved the problem of how to do the book.
So you didn't sort of start from the beginning of the story and work through the story and come to the end of the story in your illustrative method?
No, I never do that.
You never do that?
No. I have to get the idea for each picture separately. Now, in this book, this picture came first, and that's how it evolved. It's abstract. It has a face in it because it was necessary. And then from that, I had the pattern for the whole book, you see, and everything followed suit. Even his clothes, you see, I did in this patterned and squared way. So, and the title page too. But that's how the book evolved, from that particular point of the North Wind.
Do you have a sort of an image of the audience who are going to receive your books and look at them?
Well, yes, I do direct my work to young children. But there are problems in that, because you have to seek the child within yourself. You don't talk down to children. And I think really that most people have an area of childhood in them, and they do seem to, all people seem to have a loving for all that's good and nice in children's literature or music and so on. And we find that, you know, many people buy the books apart from children. And, you know, even grandmothers, we have quite a wide audience.
In terms of the relationship between the words of the story and the illustrations that you do, what are the important features of the connection between them as far as you're concerned?
Well, they really have to dovetail together. They're both a separate part, but yet an integral part of the book. And the secret is to make each one complement the other. Now, in a picture book, the problem is really well, first of all, before you get to the problem, you have to sort out the difference between a picture book and a picture storybook. Now, a picture storybook is what it says. It's a story, mainly of words, with pictures. Whereas a picture book is a totally different thing. It's a book of pictures with a thread of text running through, linking all the pictures together. Now, it's difficult to find a text that has a beginning, a middle, and an end that has maybe 30 lines. And most writers they wouldn't want to do it, because naturally they want to interpret the thing in their own way, and they want to paint whatever it is they want to do in words. So we have this problem of getting an idea which is strong, with a beginning, a middle, and an end, and then its main body is produced in a picture.
Most of your books, and we've got many of them here, relate to mythology or to the animal world. Have you sort of preferences in this direction, or is it just sort of accidental that you were asked or commissioned to produce books based on these themes?
No, I think I have a preference for animals, because as an artist, they give me a means of expression in which I can do all kinds of things. I can use all kinds of textures, all kinds of colours. I can pull them about. I can really do what I want with them. And in some way, they come out all right. If you do that to a human being, they're inclined to look rather strange and odd and rather unacceptable.
Yet the impact of the book, I remember when we first came across your work, it's so colourful and the use of the materials is so inventive. Mm-hmm. Would you say that the actual quality of the materials that you use influenced the style of the illustration that emerges?
No, I don't think so. I think you can paint with whatever materials you have on hand, whether it's a piece of mud or a chalk. You don't need fine paints or fine paper to create. Mm. You can do it on a wall or on a brick or on the floor. But what did influence making these pictures is the fact that colour litho reproduction seemed to become perfected. Yes. And we were able to reproduce almost to perfection what we did. And this is important because if you use a colour area like this and the tones and colours that we use, they have to be beautifully produced. Otherwise you get it's like if, say, Toscanini conducted the Royal Philharmonic and the recording was a bad one, you wouldn't hear the loveliness and the beauty of the tonal qualities and all the music coming out and singing. In this kind of work, you must have superb reproduction. Otherwise, the whole essence of the book is lost because it's the relationships of colours and shapes that really make the whole thing. If that's missing, it doesn't work.
Do you write any of the books yourself?
Yes, I write. Well, the La Fontaines are an adaptation of the verses, but most of my recent work I have written myself.
Do you see that as an advantage, or do you find it? Do you set your own limitations when you write the story, or how do you set about that? Because that must be quite a tricky thing to do.
Well, it's tricky, but it's a great advantage because, again, this problem of getting a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end, very short and compact. Well, if I get my own ideas, I can relate the two together. As you're working through the book, you might sort of suddenly realize that certain words are not necessary because it's all there in the picture. Therefore, you can cut them out.
Right.
And the two work hand in hand, and it's a great advantage.
These, as I say, the decorative quality of them was something which made a tremendous impact, I remember at first. Would you say that you've been influenced by any illustrator or painter that you could sort of positively identify?
Well, you might not be able to see it in the paintings. My main area of study was really studying Goya and Piero della Francesca and Giotto, wonderful painters. And
very
modern.
Flat, of course.
They were flat, yes.
Right.
And really are as modern today as they were, in those centuries ago.
Right.
And of course, someone like Picasso, his great contribution was really in the teaching of the fact that you can take the old methods and bring them back into the 20th century.
One thing that struck me as well, looking through a number of them, was, are you interested particularly in the Italian Renaissance period? It seems to come through the paintings a great deal, and the illustrations.
Yes, it does, in fact. It is
because
something that's
looking at many of them, this tended to be the case.
Yeah. If you've ever been to Florence, and you've seen Brunelleschi's magnificent dome on the cathedral, it's just wonderful. And these are things shapes you can never get out of your mind.
Quite.
And I suppose all this is really.
So there's a tremendous sense of sort of imaginative participation in books like this. What about books like the puzzle book, where you perhaps are attempting something which is much more definitive in some respects? If you're trying to look at number or the sequence of number ordering on things like this, how would you approach something like this sort of problem?
Well, first of all, I must say that the philosophy which we work on is that we want to cover the whole span of a child's education. Mm-hmm. And one of them is this, first of all, the creative instinct to be inspired and nurtured, and the other one is to teach it certain things. And one of the best ways of teaching is to amuse the child. Mm-hmm. And the child is usually best amused when it's also involved. Yes. You involve the child.
Right.
Well, in a book of puzzles, the child has to be involved.
Right.
So this is how the book. Actually, something happened to the printing here. All that I've said about it. You see, it's the black slipped.
Yeah,
In fact,
it's more obvious in the type,
yes,
isn't it?
it's rather a rare copy, this.
Right.
It's like a stamp, you
Really?
know, that's
Right.
no perforations. Keep it.
Right, we will. We'll hope nobody will steal it.
Right. But simple things like, you know, how many chicks should the mother have?
Right.
There are 3 eggs, 2
Right.
chicks.
Right.
So it's simple.
Right.
And then you get, you know, what's the donkey carrying in its basket? And really, whatever the child cares to say is, I mean, if the child misses out the carrots, it's not important.
No.
Not important. Involve the child.
Essentially, it's a very sort of magical involvement, like the magical involvement in the myths.
Yes.
Comes across in a very similar sort of way.
Mm-hmm. You must involve the child
Right.
in this. See, there's something strange about this leopard. Well, it's got a white spot, you see. But if it says it's got an owl on its tail,
Right.
that's as good an answer. It doesn't matter.
And so there's a whimsical quality in them too.
Yes.
Greatly.
Yes.
So, what about the actual way you work in terms of the size of the drawing or the painting? Do you work larger or smaller, or how do you overcome the problems technically?
No, all the paintings are made exactly the same size.
Uh-huh.
And that way I know exactly what the picture will look like on the page.
Right.
And the areas left for the type have got to be very precise. And also there's the fact that if you reduce a drawing, if this were reduced that way, it reduces that way also.
Right.
And for example, that line there, a very thin line marking the edge of the leg, that might disappear altogether
I see.
in the
Right.
in the breadth. So it's a great advantage to draw exactly the same size.
Yeah.
I think, anyway.
So I see also you've got a book here, Fishes. Is that, are you ever attacked or criticised because of the apparent grammatical problems in any of the writing? Like fishes or fish or...
No, fishes is
You
correct.
check them all out?
It can be fish or fishes.
Uh-huh.
Yes, and this was an attempt to bring back into the English language the collective nouns which had disappeared.
Right.
There are a few left, like a herd of elephants and a school of fish, but there are more definitive terms. See, well, here we have a school of butterfly fish, and then you have a flock of dolphin, which is rather strange, but they are all authentic.
Yeah.
And in fact, only one. Do we have it here? No, I don't think so. In birds, the owl is not authentic. At least it wasn't. I hope it is now.
Right.
But there were 2 owls, and there was no collective noun for owls because they're not a collective animal, or bird rather.
Right.
So we invented the word a stare of owls. Maybe we'll have it in the New Oxford Dictionary that might come in.
I noticed that you've not illustrated any science fiction books, you know, any Arthur Heinlein books or anything of that sort. Mm-hmm. Are you attracted to any other sort of theme, apart from the ones we can see that you've done?
Yes, as a matter of fact, science fiction does interest me. I love science fiction work. And in fact, I was asked to do a picture book of the end part, which is glorious, of Third Encounter, what's it
Close
called?
Encounters.
Close Encounters.
Oh, that would have been fabulous.
Yes, but I thought, oh, well, why don't I do my own? And then I had an idea. Fourth Encounter.
Right.
So I started to do my own.
And where will you start with a thing like that again, assembling the research bits, the photographs? Will you refer to things like the actual film of Close Encounters?
No, I wouldn't refer to that. No, I would, first of all, you find your theme. I'll give you an example, not about how it goes.
Would it be possible at this stage for you to do any drawing?
I don't think so.
No, you don't think so?
Because it's too involved. But a story would start like this. You're driving along in a motor car.
Right.
You suddenly see a goat. You think, what an extraordinary shape. I like that.
Mm.
And then it has possibilities. It's an attractive animal to children. Yes, attractive to draw, attractive to me. It interests me, which is the main thing. Then you start thinking of all the involvements that a goat will get into, all the things that it eats, all the funny things that could happen.
So humour is an important part, isn't it, in the way one constructs the story?
Yes. And then it would evolve from that. Then you'd think of a beginning, and then an idea would come out of it as a story. Then you'd have a beginning, then a middle, and then you'd get an end to it.
Right.
And there it is. The next stage is you lay it down very roughly on a piece of paper, and then, of course, when you've just done the idea, you think it's marvellous. So, as you get older, you get wiser. It might not be good. So you lay it on one side.
Right.
I do. On a shelf, and I don't look at it for ages. Then I bring it out and I coldly look at it and think it is really no good. Right. Or it has possibilities.
How much wastage you get? I mean, a painter would assume that, say, for a major exhibition of 60 or so paintings, that you're looking at 100, 110 paintings.
Oh, yes.
How does that work comparably?
About the same.
About the same.
It used to be much higher, but I would do, I say, 3 drawings for every 2 that I get now. I used to do 15.
But that's right. That's much more. I was saying it's very economic, that, isn't it? Really?
Yes, but you see, I've as I get older, I've discovered more how I work, and what I do now is instead of sitting down at a piece of paper, and working out 100 ideas and exhausting myself.
Right.
What you do is you go and dig the garden, or sit drinking a glass of wine, just looking at the glorious scenery, until you really have solved in your mind exactly how to do that particular piece of work.
Right.
And then you go and do it, and you channel all your vital forces to that particular moment when you do it. And there it is. It's fresh, and we hope original, and that's it.
And so really what you've now described is what you would consider to be a successful illustration. It has to be creative and has to be exciting. When do you know that it has reached that point? Do you bring judgments from previous work to bear on it? Or do you make the judgments relative to the thing that you're just doing?
Well, when my children were younger, I used to use them as a kind of guinea pigs. And they would rush in from school, and they'd come up, and I never said anything. They would just come up, and if they said nothing, I knew there was something wrong.
Right.
In other words, there may be nothing wrong with it as a painting, but somehow I hadn't hit their wavelength.
Right.
So, well, you've got to rethink. So there's something missing. So I would do it again, trying to discover what it is that's missing. It may be the way the eye is looking out at them. Or it may be, you see, these actually shoot.
Right.
They shoot the insect down with little bubbles of water.
Right.
And it may be just in the eye where the little whimsy is there. And then if they come up and say, oh, I love that. Yeah. Oh, you're there. Right. That's it.
Would you distinguish between, say, illustrating for children and illustrating for adults?
Well, not many books really are illustrated for children. I mean, for adults, I beg your pardon. Well, it does seem to me
to make a point of comparison, let's say that the Cruikshank illustrations for the Dickens books, perhaps, I mean, it's been supplanted, that sort of idiom maybe, but in the idea of specifically illustrating for children, would you distinguish different sorts of images for adults?
Yes, I think you would. I think you really would. And I think anyone that says they don't, I think is really not quite telling the truth. What the artist hopes is that he expresses himself.
Right.
And especially in this day and age, and just expects and hopes that it is also right for children. Because, I mean, some works are very lovely, but maybe really don't have the wavelength for the child, which is really rather sad. But, I mean, it is a case of this. This does happen. But, see, there are basically two kinds of illustration. See, the Cruikshanks you mentioned, very humorous, beautifully drawn, but they are basically illustrations which are in a way a diagrammatic representation of the text. Whereas the new movement in picture books, I think, is where the text is used as a creative stimulus to produce a painting, which is, again, complementary to the text, but which is a thing in its own right. And that is really what, you try and achieve. I mean, these could not have been produced 200 years ago. It's been an impossibility, because the area of thinking wasn't even right.
Do you see children's illustrations then as essentially sort of intimate communication between the child and a set of potential ideas that you hope to explore with them?
Yes, absolutely. And if you see children looking at interesting books with their legs tucked up, there is a marriage between them and the book, which, for example, you never really get with the child on television. And it becomes engrossed, but it's sort of like an ephemeral string going through its head. Whereas a book establishes a wonderful bond with the child.
You live in France now, not in England. Do you find that the colour, the light, or whatever, has influenced the way you've illustrated?
I think it's not influenced me in the colour, because in England the colour is really very much more soft and grey, and I always yearned for the strong sunlight and colour, and so I recreated it, in my books. What moving to France did for me is it gave me new shapes and new textures, new floras, and I work out of my head, and you have to sort of refertilize the brain occasionally, and a move like that and new vistas does help.
And it takes a little time to assimilate the sorts of images that you can use.
Yes.
Well, thanks very much. Would you like to finish our little discussion by doing some drawing?
Right, I'll do good. If you hold it,
right,
maybe I can do something that you might like to try with children.
Right.
Okay. Hold it both.
Yeah.
It's really quite simple.
But you have a lot of knowledge of the anatomy of animals. In other words, you can't just make the marks up, not really.
No. You have to really know the shape and the structure of the animal before you can draw it. This is why when people say, draw me a platypus, well,
how can
unless you know what it looks like,
yeah,
you really can't draw it. So you have to study it and get to know what shapes it has, and then recreate them.
Well, thank you. That's a magnificent drawing. Thank you very much, Brian.
My pleasure.